Afternoon, guys. Dr. Ken Nordberg here again. Yesterday uh, I told you we had a long talk yesterday about how whitetails uh, discover us hunters during hunting seasons. Today I'm following up with a similar talk about what whitetails do when they discover us in the woods. And they respond in various ways. Not simply because one deer would respond differently if it's a fawn and another one differently if it's a dominant breeding buck. There are differences that way, but these are more general reasons. Also, we'll be talking about how much whitetails know about us hunters. And you're going to be really surprised about this subject, but we'll bring that up while we're talking about these things. Before I get started, I want to thank you guys for watching me. My YouTube channel has been really great. It's unbelievable about the numbers of people that have been watching me. I've made more than 100 YouTube presentations about deer hunting. That's kind of amazing too. But like I said, I think way back when I started doing this, I used to put on hunting schools. I did that for many years, a couple of decades, up in northern Minnesota, up where I hunt deer. And during these schools, half the time was spent in the woods. And I would usually have about 20 guys. They'd come from all over the country. That's about as big as a number of people as I cared to have in the woods. But where they could learn firsthand, here, look at this, you guys, and stuff like that all day long. But the point is that when I was putting on that hunting school, we'd have 8 hours of classroom instruction for the first 2 days, and then 8 hours a day out in the woods. And then I would put on little 4-hour seminars in the evening as well. And by the end of the school, all the time, it's like I was talking continuously the whole time we were together. I wished I had more time, because there were other things that I would have talked about if I had had more time. Well, it's sort of like this as you might begin to gather. You look back over 100 presentations, that's a lot to talk about, and I'm still anxious to talk about a lot more. And we get on some of these subjects that most hunters have never thought of before, and hunting techs never thought of before. Things about whitetails never knew before. And that's been a little bit of a problem for me over the years, because especially when I first started writing about what I was learning with my studies, wild deer, everything I was coming up with was so different that people, including editors of well-known magazines, were having a little trouble trying to decide whether what I was writing about was the actual truth or not, because it was so different from what everybody believed at that time. And it's still that way to some extent. And for that reason, there's still lots of hunters who think, oh, that can't possibly be true. This is a whole bunch of junk. That can't be true. But it is. And in this case, it's not, I'm no one hunting trip expert. I'm no expert about anything about whitetails that I happen to see, observe once or twice in all the years I've been doing this. Everything is based on what 80 to 90% of deer of each behavioral class of whitetails does, and that's like many thousands of them under similar circumstances for as long as 10 to 20 years. And when you do that, keeping track of what I was seeing all that time, by the end of that kind of period of time doing this sort of thing, it could only be true. It could only be right. And if it's different from what people believe, that's too bad. Well, if people believe differently about these things, they really don't know much about whitetails. You know, most guys don't spend that much time in the woods observing whitetails. You know, or just one weekend a year of deer hunters, a lot of us. How much do you learn in that time? Especially if you aren't seeing deer, you know, except you think you've learned something like, boy, there aren't many deer in this area, or there aren't any big bucks in this area for one reason or another. You learn that because based on what you've seen, your own experiences there. Well, unless you've done the kind of research I've done, you could believe that the rest of your life and believe anybody that says differently is just plain wrong. Well, I don't teach that. I don't teach things that I think might be right or things that I know are wrong, and no matter what anyone says. So, but it's all right if you want to disagree. Go ahead. But eventually, you know, most of the guys have been hunting for quite a few years, and I get letters from guys like that all the time, talking about how they hunted all those years and never got a buck, and then they decided to try something that I taught, and it worked. They're so happy. And guys said, yeah, I got 10 pointers in my house. That I got them all doing what you taught me, you know. There's guys that'll tell you, oh, I got hundreds of bucks. There ain't such a person unless they're hunting on private fenced property. Now, if you're hunting on public land for whitetails, all that number of bucks is pretty unusual. So, and especially if you don't know a lot about what whitetails do under different circumstances. So, well, enough of that. I better get busy and start teaching you here. Whitetails have 5 stages of alarm, depending on what they see, you know, as far as hunters are concerned. And once they got you sized up, which might be just take a split second or might take 15 minutes before they decide, they'll react in one of 5 ways. And it varies according to how dangerous the situation might appear to the deer. And we're talking about mature whitetail, deer that have survived 3 or more hunting seasons. Now, it's kind of true of fawns and yearlings and 2.5-year-old bucks, but they're a little more erratic in their responses because they haven't got a lot of experience yet. We're talking about deer that you hardly ever see because they respond in one of these 5 ways, depending on what they decide to do, based on what they see you doing. So, it's kind of good to know these things. For example, one good reason is there are things you can do to reduce the level of alarm of a deer in sight, keeping it from abandoning its range and perhaps giving you another better chance of taking it hours or days later. Where I hunt deer, gee, our deer numbers are way down now. They've never been over 11 per square mile. Most years they've never been above 8 per square mile. And right now, I don't know yet. I haven't done a complete assessment of deer numbers in our hunting area. And I won't know until probably mid-November what we've got as far as numbers are concerned. But we had a relatively mild winter last year. That doesn't necessarily mean we've got a lot more deer. We had a lot more twin fawns, that's for sure, last May when they were being born. But our wolves are really tough on our fawns, so that might not reflect larger numbers this year. And it certainly wouldn't reflect larger numbers of the deer that we normally hunt, my sons and I. bucks that are 3.5 years of age or older, although we do take a fair number of 2.5-year-old bucks each year, many years, and so it doesn't, large number of fawns. It take 3 years for those fawns to grow up and be the kind of deer that we would care to hunt. Well, but point is, the younger deer are not as predictable in the way they react as the older deer, the more experienced deer. Well, I've mentioned that, whitetails will readily detect strange odors up 200 yards away, and well beyond that, but I've deliberately presented different odors to whitetails 200 yards downwind. And one of the interesting things was that at that range, no matter how strange it was, they didn't act at all alarmed. But they raised their heads. That indicated right there, at that point, when that scent hit them and their heads came out and looked in my direction, they were briefly alarmed to some degree, but not a lot of, when this stage 1 alarm is kind of a mild thing. The whitetail's tail won't go up, it'll stay down. Sometimes you'll see it fan out a little bit right at that point, and then go back to being narrow tail again. But the head will come up and it'll look in your direction and listen, the ears going, and they're smelling the air, At this point, they're trying to decide what to do. Well, one of the things that must come to their minds, it's hard to imagine, a human trying to think the way a deer would think, but at this moment that they become alarmed by something strange and unusual they just smelled, are they thinking that they need to run, or are they thinking, well, I'll just not do anything until I decide what to do? I think it's that kind of thing. They're alarmed. They're aware now. They've been alerted by you, by odor. It could be the same thing for a strange and unusual sound, a sound that's not normal in the woods, that only is made by a human, like a whistle, a sharp whistle, or the sound of a human voice, or a cough or sneeze, or some metallic sound. And right away their head will come, no matter what it is, the head will come up and they'll stare in your direction briefly, but about then they're thinking, that's 200 yards away, well that's far away, I'm a safe distance away, and it doesn't seem, whatever it is, it doesn't seem to be getting closer, it's not heading toward me, there's no sounds or the odor getting stronger, which it would if you were going closer. None of those things are happening. Nothing to worry about. Just that momentary moment, that quick moment when they were suddenly alert and suddenly slightly alarmed, and then they aren't. Then they relax again and they go back to doing what they were doing. Well, probably every phase of alarm starts out very similar. But the way the whitetail responds afterwards can be quite different. For example, let's say it was the whitetail was noticed by the sound or the smell or whatever. That whatever caused them to become momentarily alarmed or alerted is a lot closer than 200 yards. Let's say it's 50 yards. Well, when it's that close, that's a little bit different. When you get under 50 yards, as far as the whitetail is concerned, whatever caused that is potentially dangerous. And at that point, they can respond, well, it can be a little different in each case, simply by continuing to be alerted or slightly alarmed. The tail isn't up yet, but now they're really interested in what that is, what caused that sound, or what made that odor, or what made that motion over there. And in this case, they're trying to decide how dangerous it is, what it is. And at this point, if they hear another, or they get another whiff of what they smelled, or they see something else moving, and it's a tall thing moving, not a little squirrel or something. It's way up here. And it doesn't have antlers and big ears, you know. It's got square shoulders, short neck, things like that. That's a human over there. Well, now the whitetail, when he's figure out, well, that whatever it is over there, it is potentially dangerous. Now, it's trying to decide how it can react at this point. Should he move away? Should I run? Bound away quickly as I can? Should I snort and alert all the deer around? You know, those are especially the real grand snorters of whitetails. And there's a reason for that. Big bucks, when they're confronted by danger, they don't care about what happens to all the other deer that might be around where that buck is. Heck with them. When that buck decides to move away, to bound away or sneak away, he don't care about those other deer. They can do what they want, but I'm getting out of here. Well, whitetail, the big bucks do that, you know, when they use other deer like radar, you know, and watch from a distance, like out in the feeding area, to see if those deer are acting at all like something dangerous might be near. He's not thinking about whether, you know, any danger those deer might be facing. He's only thinking about himself before deciding. But the big bucks, older bucks, are really selfish about that. A buck, I've seen it time and time again, when there's been a buck with a doe, was close to where I was when I was the upwind guy on our channel nudge hunting method. And my son Ken was down below, and I've seen, gee, these deer, they were downwind from me. And finally, when they decided, well, I think we'll go, the doe would go in one direction, and the buck would go in a different direction. All of a sudden, that doe being in heat wasn't important to that buck anymore. And but those bucks, they don't care about that. But does do care. You know, every doe has well, they can get old enough to not bear young, but every doe usually has one or two fawns, sometimes even three, within their little home range. Their little home range, on the average, up where I hunt, is about 126 acres, but it can be as small as 90 and up to 200, 250 even in some cases, depending on the population of whitetails in the area. But there's always young. They've got this year's fawns and last year's yearlings living on their ranges. Now the yearlings, when they get to be yearlings, during the summer months, they're exploring. They're starting to spend more and more time away from the mothers. They might feed with them today and not maybe in the morning and not in the afternoon, feed somewhere else. But they're exploring, and sometimes they explore off range as well. Because by the next spring, they're going to all want to have their own home range. And they're kind of learning about, you know, what constitutes a home range. If they happen to walk into another doe's home range, an adjacent doe's home range, that doe might treat them rather roughly. You guys can't be in my home range with my young. And if those deer come up really close, more than likely that other doe might just kick the deer. They're really hard. You see actual gashes in the hide where they can do that. Chase them out of there. Well, they learn quickly then, as does do, you don't invade home ranges of other does with young. But does, when they detect something dangerous within their home range, one of the first things they think about is their young. And even when the young are just little spotted fawns, one of the things they're going to do is snort. And when they make that snort, those little fawns might react in one of two ways. The doe might think, well, the best way is just drop down to the ground and lay there in deep grass. And In a case like that, a predator or a hunter would have to practically step on that little fawn to actually see it. There it is. That's a good way to react when they hear that snort from the mother. Or they might run to the mother. That might be a pretty good one too. And I've seen it. One doe didn't know what to do because one of her fawns did that when my wife Jean was photographed. One of the wives, or the does, flattened itself in the grass, and the other one ran to the mother. And she wanted to run away, but she was worried about that little fawn laying in the grass. And I think then she snorted several more times, or probably with each snort that little fawn in the grass was pressing himself further down harder and harder on the ground. So eventually we left the area so they could all get together again. But does are concerned about other deer. So most of the time when you hear a deer snort, it's a doe that's doing the snorting. An older doe, probably 3 years of age or older. Now, bucks snort, but generally they won't snort unless they're suddenly surprised to find a human very close. Holy cow, there's a human right there. That buck is going to be bounding away and snorting, and I don't know if he's mad at himself or goofing up, or he was just so surprised and he couldn't believe that could happen, but he might snort several times as he bounds away. But normally, when deer, an alerted deer, like now here you are hunting through the woods, and here's a doe over there, and that doe spots you. Oh gee, it could be 100 yards away even, or you never know. If one is really close, like 20 yards, 30 yards away, and they spot you, they're likely to snort because they're warning their offspring, their fawns and their yearlings, there's something very dangerous here. Sometimes they have a problem with that. Like, for example, they might get just a whiff, or they just heard a metallic click, like pulling the safety, moving the safety on your rifle, that little click, and all of a sudden, oh, there's something dangerous. Where is it? If they know something is dangerous is near, but they don't know where it is, this can be really just so frustrating to a doe. And she's got these offspring to worry about. She might not know which way to run. Where is this dangerous thing, this hunter? And I've seen it happen where they would just stand there with their tail coming up and fanning out. When it's fanned and halfway up, that's a pretty alarmed deer, very alarmed deer. But there's some differences, you know, in the way these different deer react, whether they're does or fawns or yearlings or mature bucks or even dominant breeding bucks. Well, let's get back now. Stage 1 alarm is that where a deer becomes alert because something at least potentially dangerous might be near. But if it's far enough away that they don't have to worry about it, that's the end of it. Or if that stage 1 isn't much, and you know, it's not a really important alarm stage. Nothing really bad comes from it. But it can get to be a little more. Now, let's say now that deer heard that thing and they looked up, and like I was saying before, they discovered that is a hunter over there. That is a hunter in a tree or on the ground over there. And I saw it move, and it's big, and everything on the sides is up to hunter. Now at this point, when that deer knows there's something dangerous over there, but at the moment it doesn't appear whatever is dangerous is over there. It doesn't appear that the hunter knows the deer is there. It's not acting as if it's hunting that deer, or is moving toward the deer, snaking, or stopping, looking around. It's not doing something like that. In that case, it's not moving toward it, but it's potentially dangerous. That deer doesn't want to be any closer to it than it is now. And in this case, too, it might still be thinking, well, maybe if it's going that way or that way or going away, we don't have to worry about it at all. In which case, the deer might just move a little bit to where it's hidden by cover. There's natural cover between the deer and where that hunter is, and they'll stand there and watch that hunter for a while. They can stand there and not move for 15 minutes. I've seen that happen too quite a bit. I've been at a stand where I could hear a deer. I was certain there was a deer moving behind me from left to right. And I turned in my stand side very slowly and looked backwards to see the deer. And I couldn't see anything. And I waited and waited and waited. I could have sworn it had been a deer. And maybe it was just a squirrel or something, or a fisher going by, something like that. But what that deer did, and that, you know, I've seen it happen over and over again, not only when the deer was reacting to my presence, but the presence of other hunters, because it could stand there partially hidden for 15 minutes without even moving. I remember not so many years ago, I was at a stand, and I saw a movement, and all of a sudden, there was a deer. I could see it, and it was hidden by evergreens. And I could see its neck. I saw a big white throat patch. Neck seemed kind of large, you know, enlarged. I said, that's got to be a buck. But I wasn't about to shoot at it without knowing for sure. What I was waiting for is antlers. And I kept watching and watching, and it didn't move. It almost gets to the point where you think you're seeing things. Maybe that's just a stump. And I've had other deer that I thought maybe were just stumps as well. And I thought, well, I think I'll get my rifle up here now. And I've been frozen myself all this time. I didn't dare move because obviously the deer was facing me. And it had been alerted to my presence somehow, and now it was trying to decide what to do. Now, in this case, where he stayed frozen for a while, that's phase 2 of alarm. And that deer he doesn't know how to react yet any further. He's just waiting. So I eased my rifle up, and I thought, well, I'll get the safety off too and be ready. Because the moment I see antlers, I'm going to fire right at that neck, that throat patch. And I waited and waited and waited and waited, and finally, well, I don't know. And I don't know if it was just a movement I made like that right at that point. That deer whirled and took off. All of a sudden, that deer was in stage 5 alarm. And in the process of whirling, I saw an antler. And trying to get my gun on that deer, and I didn't see anything of it anymore after that, so I didn't get a shot at it. But the deer that's undecided, like I was saying, is trying to decide what to do. But he's not running, but he is making an attempt to make sure you don't notice the deer. And so it's frozen, doesn't move. And a whitetail, it's amazing how it can just stand there and be like a statue made out of concrete and not move for 15 minutes. Wow, that's really amazing. Now, yearling, under that kind of circumstance, a yearling buck, he'd be just dying of curiosity. So there's something there, but I don't know what it is. And pretty soon they'll start sneaking forward and getting a little closer and looking, and you know, might be looking right at you, seeing your silhouette, but your silhouette's not moving, so it's not sure, you know, and I go, stomp, and look to see if you move, stomp, with the front foot, nothing happens, sneak a little closer, and then it'll maybe get half the distance away, and it's stand there looking at you, and at that point it'll lose its nerve, whirl and run away. And I said, well, I took care of that. About 15 minutes later, here he comes again, he's sneaking back again, stomp. I've seen yearling bucks do that many times over the years. It's that kind of response that makes yearling bucks the most, one of the easiest deer in the woods to take. They're doing those dumb things. That, and then decide, I don't know what to do. I want to get to mother. I'm going to run to mother. And mother is over this way, apparently. Maybe at a feeding area or bedding area. And I want to get there as quick as possible and just race right by you and give you an easy chance to take the deer. But yearlings just make so many goofy mistakes. But never think big bucks do that. No way. They might be serious. They might be curious and wish they could come closer, but they'll never do anything like that. You'll never see a big dominant buck do something like that. But anyway, so that's stage two. You know, they'll freeze, maybe standing right where they first became alerted or felt momentarily alarmed. But usually they'll freeze then and look your way and look and look and look, trying to decide what to do. Now, if you don't move, if they catch no movement, they don't get any scent of you, you don't make any sound, all the while they're looking at you, they'll usually give up. They've lost the game. There's no human there. I'm going to eat. Now go back to eating or whatever they were doing when that confrontation began. Maybe just walking by. So, well, I think I'll just continue going to where I was going. Yeah, well, one of the things, you know, when they get past this, get to the point where they decide nothing to worry about, just before they move, make that move, they'll flick their tail from side to side, you know, bing, bing, like that, and then they'll take a step forward. I've noticed that, you know, you see a number of deer feeding together, and generally, one of them will always have his head up, you know, they'll take turns, head up, watching the area around, listening while the others are feeding, you know, act as a sentinel. And then other heads will come up, they'll be up chewing, and the guy that was sentinel, his head will go down, and the others will watch. But generally, like, I've watched a doe feeding past my stand, and a fawn behind her, and she's feeding on grass or leaves or whatever, or browse. But whenever she stops and her head goes down, just before she's going to raise her head again, she'll flick her tail. It's like almost like a signal, I'm about to raise my head. And then, or while it's feeding and it's decided, well, I'm going to go over there about 10 feet and chew branches off that bush. But just before she makes her move, tail flick again. Seems like while it's standing still, the brake light is on, but you don't see it. But when they do that, the brake light is off and move on to the next spot. But that's kind of stage one kind of stuff when you see that. Be sure to visit my website. Here's the link. Here you'll find links to my blog posts, my Twitter account, my YouTube account, my Amazon store with links to my ebooks, my son's eBay store, a money saver if you're ordering from Canada or other countries, my website bookstore, and much more.